Hi, I'm Gordon Kerry, and I'm the composer of the Sinfonia Concertante for Flute, Clarinet and Orchestra, which Alison and Irit are going to talk about with me now before it's performed with the QSO in April and May.
Sinfonia Concertante is making its world premiere in Brisbane with Queensland Symphony Orchestra.
And Irit and I are really looking forward to the world premiere performances in the QPAC Concert Hall. What was your inspiration for this work, Gordon?
It all goes back to when you and I worked together on the Flute Concerto in Scotland, and thought then very vaguely about what fun it would be to write a double concerto. There aren't many for flute and clarinet, although there are more. Since I wrote the piece, I discovered that there are more than I thought there were. But it's not a hugely large repertoire, unlike, say, flute and oboe or whatever else. And I thought it would be very interesting to try and bring together two instruments which do blend very well. So you can sort of treat them like one super instrument as well as two soloists.
Hopefully they blend well.
And set that off against the orchestral colour. But you'll notice that the orchestration of the piece is actually fairly restrained. I don't use a huge wind or brass section. So it's really more about giving prominence to, certainly at the high end of things, to flute and clarinet, often helped along a little bit with the harp and the tuned percussion. And so using the orchestra as a kind of kaleidoscopic background to that. So in a sense, that was the kind of the sounds that I felt I could make were much of the inspiration of the piece. So it's very much it's a self-contained, abstract work, but I think that it should have its own internal story or drama.
So you kind of just answered this question when you said, what can we expect to hear in this world premiere? But I guess you're really looking for the blend of the two instruments, and you definitely from, Alison and I working through the work. For me, it's definitely up in the higher register of the clarinet, which is a nice challenge for me. But is that you're kind of picturing the instruments soaring out over the orchestra? That kind of, and then also.
I thought I'd given it the clarinet a fair amount of lower lying stuff as well.
Yeah, the solo
and I am
side,
aware that it's very easy, especially because I'm a reformed flautist. It's very easy to assume that the clarinet can do the sort of stuff right up high that the flute can. And I have to remind myself that it's not always comfortable for a player, and it can be a bit sort of squeaky if
do not ever use that word with a clarinet.
But it is there is this beautiful kind of the trumpet-like qualities of the clarinet up high. And certainly create that thread of kind of bright sound against the background. That's certainly a big part of it. But as I say, I did try and take it down into the shallow register for some contrasting dark stuff, which again, the flute can't do that at all.
Yes, we do have the widest range.
Alto. So that's that. It's in those sorts of areas where this is unquestionably clarinet music. I think. Yes. I hope.
No, I definitely. There's a solo line without Alison where it really embraces the chalumeau, which is the low register of the clarinet, very mellow, warm area, which I'm looking forward to playing that bit particularly, apart from, not the high squeaky bits.
So, Gordon, just talking about that, what's your thought process and how do you build a new composition like this?
Well, I guess I start in a sense with the overall scale of the piece. So I wanted it to be a substantial work. So a 20-minute work is pretty substantial, I think.
Yeah,
and so in that regard, I needed to think a little bit about the overall the form of it, the structure, what sort of component sections it might consist of. Whether do you do a 4-minute work like a standard sort of symphonic work, a 3-minute concerto, a 3-movement concerto rather, and I opted in fact for 4 movements, even though it all plays in one overall span, and with a generally speaking, a movement from very serene, very quiet, very slow music to very fast, rhythmically emphatic, I hope exciting music at the end.
Yep.
And then having variously contrasting sections within the piece so that the orchestra or the audience's expectations are built up and then subverted and then built up again, and then finally all is revealed with the final, exciting music at the end of the piece. Having done that, I guess I also at the same time think about what are the implications of any motivic or thematic ideas that might come to mind, and it can be as short as a rhythmic motive, it can be a particular texture, it can be a fully scored or fully thought out melody, or it can be a series of chords. And I think you'll find through the piece there are certain elements which recur either immediately recognisably or transformed so that there's a sense you might get of, I think I have heard this before, but not in this particular form. And that's development in any kind of traditional symphony works pretty much the same way. And so that's a way of giving the piece a sense of an unfolding narrative or drama.
Thinking of our audiences, what do you think they could expect to hear, say, the interplay between Alison and myself and the orchestra? Is it really focused on the wind section, or is it generally the whole orchestra as a colour? And is it quite, you said it's tonal and rhythmic, but what could they expect to hear as an audience, or keep their
Well, it depends. I mean, I've tried to keep it as varied and fairly constantly varied as I can. So at the very start of the piece, for example, long before the soloists enter, I have that very, very serene high string writing. It's quite slow moving. It is contrapuntal, but it's sort of like a memory of, Renaissance church music or something like that, but right up high, floating high above the texture, as it were. And then that is contrasted with some music in which the upper strings play a rapid shimmering sort of sound, and there's a melody that comes in which is it's in fact doubled cor anglais, cello, viola, and that gives it a lovely rich, you can't quite tell what instrument's playing it, but it's a lovely dark rich sound, and that comes in underneath this shimmering. And so you've got two very different kinds of music there, which will, I hope, lead the audience to think, well, what are the flute and clarinet going to do when they finally appear?
Just standing there doing nothing, looking pretty. Hopefully.
And so I guess the question, what then happens is that shimmering moves down into the lower string parts, so very, very rapid, repeated notes, and fragmentary melodies that come out in the oboe and the trumpet and upper strings. And against that is this tracery of very fast-moving give and take between the flute and clarinet. And so the sense of your arrival as soloists should be, doing this amazing, rapid, colourful stuff as the orchestra just sort of goes along quietly underneath. So I'm hoping that will be a kind of, it's not a theatrical entrance, but it's a dramatic entrance, I think you could say.
Yeah.
So as the piece goes on, the orchestra, I try and use the orchestra as often as a big sort of rhythmic single instrument. So in the faster section, so the second movement of the piece, for example, and again towards the end, you'll often have the orchestra playing quite complex but very clearly articulated rhythmic patterns, again supporting very much more complicated music for solo, flute and clarinet.
Quite complicated.
We're loving it.
Yeah, it's been a good challenge.
Yeah.
And then, of course, one wants, the surprise element. So, for example, at the end of that first section of flute and clarinet playing, there's a sudden hush the strings playing a an A major chord very, 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 very softly, and the harp, plays that. So it's like opening a window into a completely different tonal landscape. So those sorts of things happen, I think, often enough to keep people interested.
I'm sure. Yeah, that sounds very exciting.
Oh, that's brilliant, Gordon. Thanks for that.
It'll be nice to hear it in the orchestra, not on a MIDI file, MP3 file.
Yes. I've only listened to that once. That's enough.
Like Alex playing my music, it's awful.
Yeah, very rhythmic though, very in time.
Yes.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing you for the concerts, and I very much look forward to playing it and experiencing the whole thing as it develops with the orchestra and with the conductor Ben Northey.
Yeah, very much so. It should be brilliant. Really, really looking forward to it. Thank you for writing for us.
Okay.
It's great.
My very great pleasure.
All right.
That's a pleasure.
Thanks, Gordon.
Thanks, Gordon.